friends. This is Rick the Fat Man, and this is your seat at the table. We are looking at Thieves of Tharbad, a J.A.R. Tolkien's Middle-earth fantasy role-playing adventure module from Iron Crown Enterprises, and it is, MERP, right? Yeah? Alright. So, let's take a look at this thing in a little bit more detail. This is a nice little map on the inside. In 1985 was when this was produced. Same year I graduated high school. Typical guidelines, abbreviations, our stat changeovers are changing, modifying for running any kind of, more or less any kind of game system. Your basic color area map key, introduction to the book, a history of Cardland itself, a history of Tharbad. Now Tharbad's an interesting location for gameplay. It typical, more closer to most fantasy, high fantasy and swords and sorcery kind of game settings than a lot of other locations in Middle Earth. It just lends itself to low level, mid level campaigns, and has as a base of operations and as a campaigns in itself. The history of the community, or the Tharbad itself, is the heart of Cardland. It is the seat of the leadership when Cardland is a state, a former nation state of Arnor, becomes a kingdom unto itself, roughly 891 or Third Age, 8 something like that. It predates most of Arnor's settlements by a considerable number. It's according to its history and history I've read in other locations. Tharbad was founded in the Second Age by Tar-Aldarion as an inland port for his fleet to use while exploring the interior of Middle Earth. Therefore, it was for the first few thousand years of its existence, Tharbad was a prime example of a civic planner's art, broad avenues, etc. This was settled and constructed at the height of Numenor's power, and served as a stepping stone or a stopping off point for a lot of activities in Middle Earth, in northwestern Middle, in Eredor specifically, but for sea adventures further south. It operated for 1,000 years or better before the fall of Numenor, and so its bloodlines and High Dunedain are well established. Tharbad easily could have followed in the footsteps of Umbar and Umber and become a dark Numenorean state or location, but circumstances and history, it doesn't play out that way. Later, when Arnor's established and Numenor's no more, the Dunedain in Arnor, the largest concentration of Dunedain, Highden and Lesser men, I believe, would be located in and around Tharbad and its regions. And geologically speaking, geographically speaking, there's reasons why Tharbad didn't become a nation prior to the settlement of Arnor, and eventually I'll do a video on Cardland, and we'll discuss some of that to some degree. We got the history of the city, and then we have the locations: north of the river, south of the river, west road, east road, because it is truly a crossroads. The local regions, we got a section on the fauna and flora, the inhabitants. Once again, one of the things that's typical of Numenorean or Dunedain settlements, in large or small, is the fact that the Dunedain are highmen, or the most educated, the most long-lived, the most advanced culturally and civically minded of all the human races in the Western Middle Earth. Eastern Middle Earth, I have different opinions. I think a lot of those Easterns, I think there's a lot of Eastern cultures and civilizations that get a bad rap because the West mindset. It's like it works today as well. So we have the Dunedain, which, once again, a largest concentration of Dunedain in the northwestern Middle Earth are going to be in and around Tharbad, in this region of Cardland, but specifically Tharbad. And a lot of those will migrate and move to Arthedain after its founding, after Arnor's founded. Some will move to Redor, others will move to Gondor, and less than that pool. The pool will spread out to some degree, but there'll still be a core group of significant size. But like unlike Gondor, well, even like Gondor, the Dunedain are never massive in number, in part because they, in order to remain culturally or physically speaking, high men, they have to kind of avoid intermingling with lesser genomes. If you just lessen you lose your lifespan, you lose your cultural heritage, other things as you diminish. You diminish straight up. You become more human, right? Instead of this high human elvish philosophy melding that's what is the faithful and was the Numenoreans for many, many years. Then you have the Dunlandings, the next largest concentration, and Dunlandings are lesser men, more tribal in nature, more nomadic to some degree, depending on where you're at. Further north from Dunland, you get the more, I think, nomadic they are, but they're still the largest concentration of humans in the region, followed by the Northmen. And the Northmen are transients. These are people who move to and become middlemen at some point with Northman heritage. The Bafrin don't. These are the truly primitive, like the Woes, the backwater hunter-gatherer types. They're not as significant. They're numbers, but not enough numbers to be a big power of any sort. So we got Section 5, Politics and Power, Tharbad and Cardlin in 1409 to 1412, a political overview. Cardlin is the successor kingdom of Arnor. I call it a failed state, a failed kinglet or whatever. By extension, the Numenorean organized in similar manners, ruled by hereditary monarch, determined through patriarchal. Until now, the kingdoms never had a ruling queen. While the king's authority is theoretically absolute in practice, he shares the power with a number of landholding barons called Hiri, H-I-R-I, excuse me, charged foremost the defense of portions of the realm, barons, etc., etc. I don't want to drag all this out. But you can see there's a lot of detail and depth in this particular module. This module is not as much about Tharbad as it is Cardlin and the region around Cardlin. This is the, until later renditions for the second generation or second 2.0 version of MERP, which I don't have very much of. This would be considered the source book for Cardlin and the regions in and around that area, which unfortunately my current map, this would it be the map below this if I know I had it. Don't know I had it, whether I still have it or not. I have to dig around. Talk about the death of the king. Then we got prominent persons or NPCs. Princess Nerville was the only living son of the late king. This takes place right after what happened is Witch King's forces in conjunction with its vassal state Rydor attacked along the Barrow Downs, and the Cardlin army was more or less crushed, and the king and his son are killed, and this starts the panic. Now the Witch King's forces don't come south, they don't attack Tharbad proper, but the people living here and in charge are not aware of this right now. Everything's very chaotic and confused. A handful of soldiers that are remaining in the north start to trickle back in, but we're dealing with politics and adventures in and around the city at that point. So these NPCs and their mayor of Tharbad, regent, a Dunedain ranger, retainer of the royal house of Carlin. Okay. Other important folk, military forces. Cardinal's army prior to the Great War of 1409 numbered roughly 400 mounted knights, 2,500 regular infantry and mercenaries, and some 15 to 16,000 minimally trained spear levies. Also, each here possessed a mounted retinue and bodyguard as follows, etc., etc., etc. Cardlin and Tharbad at other times. So if you want to set your adventures in a different period, there's a little bit of stuff here for that. I think there's some other stuff in the back as well. Devil, the alchemist, and the death of both. Okay, talks about his role in parts. Tharbad. The greatest of Cardlin's man-made works is the city of Tharbad, first, direct, and second aid. Grand efforts of the city know, I downloaded a picture of the city, but it didn't. I think I cut over too soon and I lost it. Tharbad, the climate, the city. Then we get into the city itself, the city watch, places of interest, city watch, the North Bank. One of the problems Cardland is facing. Cardland distinctly divided city in a number of ways. I don't know that. I don't think there's a map of the city itself in here. I know that I have them. There's one that comes with it. Yeah. So basically, it's three sections. You have the northern bank. You have the eastern bank. And it's developed depending on how you look at what map, how well developed they are. And then there's this great bridge that crosses this river with some constructs and stuff, not unlike the bridge at London in medieval times, where you have structures and stuff literally built on the bridge and hanging off the bridge. This bridge remains intact up until some years before the War of the Ring, when the last section is washed out by a great flood, and because it's Bromerier mentions it in the books about losing his horse at the fording at Tharbad, at the bridge of Tharbad, when he had to cross the river. His horse drowns, and then he continues to Rivendell on foot. So here's all the places of interest and their locations. Yeah, I know I have a map for the city, but I don't know if I have it handy right off the top or not. I don't want to waste too much time, because in the past I've had issues with my system crashing because this software takes a load off of my CPU or whatever and causes no end of problems. I would like to buy a bigger, more powerful laptop, but that's not on the agenda these days, with everything going to crap or not. I don't know if you see the video I did on COVID, so I won't get into any of that stuff, because it just determines. Nope. I did have a map for it, but for the life of Pete, like I said, when everything went into storage, things got transitioned, and a few things were lost over time. And some of that stuff, I made mistakes of taking those maps out of these books, and I shouldn't have. I mean, there's a vague map here, but it doesn't show this. You can see Tharbad, very brief, or not very well. There's a much colored map that goes with it. Locations, different people, sea captain, pilot, chandler, tailor, carpenter, shipyard, a couple brothels, broken over bars and inns. Oh, hey, right here. Here's the great map. I saw you had a map. It was in the book, and I should have known that. Damn it, I've been looking at it. So you can see how it's divided up. This great bridge across the center here, how it fell. So we got lots of stuff. So basically it's a big city map, a big city adventure, lots of opportunities. So we get through all that, and then we got the chapter 7, adventure guidelines, selecting an adventure, choosing a time period, suggestions on running adventures, encounters. So there's a couple in here. So adventures in and around Tharbad. City of Tharbad, located at the junction of the Great South Road and the River Guatho, is a major trading center and a stop-off point in Middle-earth. Merchants and supply caravans travel this route south from Arthedain and Bree down to the Greenway towards the Gap of Rohan and Gondor. Other rivers. It's something to keep in note. So when Arnor was in power, Tharbad would have been its major seaport, its major access to the greater Middle-earth. Arthedain and later Arthedain had to deal with Cardland, and it was cut off ocean-wise. Any major traffic would have had to come through the Gulf of Loon, which is controlled by the elves, and very depending on what time area you're at. You don't see a whole lot. I'm sure the High Dunedain didn't want to impose their shipping needs on the elves, and the elves are not that type of people. They're not hugely economically driven. So the fact that the Harlan and Forlan and the Elvish ports there are there. They're not there to service Arnor. So this would have been Arnor's seriously only major port and sea access. And then later, that's what gave Tharbad is what gave Cardolan a significant edge over its two companions, economically speaking. And pretty much that. So this whole city revolves around that. Adventures in and around Tharbad. They got an extortion ring they try to deal with, help bring it down. And then we have the theft of the tiara. A Turin nephew of Lothariel will perhaps go to pieces. Somebody stole the tiara of value. Lothariel is the jeweler, one of the most famous metal and jewelsmiths in all Carla. She has nearly completed a tiara commissioned by the now late King Othar for his daughter. The piece of mithril and sapphire is her crowning achievement. Its value would exceed 10,000 gold pieces. The materials, though, would be great. Would be the small fraction of that, perhaps only 1,500. So somebody stole it and she wants it back. And then it's a little thieving group holed up in a ruined castle on the river. The characters, story, etc. Adventures, preliminary casing, and then we got the third adventure, smugglers on the Guatho. The tale of the city of Tharbad amidst a food shortage, one of the worst of this year. Some people are having no trouble getting on only stables for foods that are considered hard to find even at the best of time. Honey and meat from Wilderland, cakes from Arthedain, salt beef from Bradur, among other items that's mysteriously servicing in the city. No doubt bought at great cost by the wealthy, while others are starving. Most treasured food items are shellfish from the coast, and Dorwin and wine, which can bring as much as 50 gold pieces a bottle for a vintage over 3 years old. In addition, the city is a haven for drug smuggling, with local consumption stopped off transported further north. Gort, grown down in the Valfalis, is moving it through large amounts, as well as Kurtir from downriver, etc., etc. Of course, there's always got to be drugs wrapped in here somewhere, right? So the task, Tharbad Law, and the last adventures, ambush north of town. Historic group and loaded mid-level. A game master should note that 1640 crew is larger, tougher, more cutthroat than the 1400 one. This is a different bandit group, just a different wrapped up. So your master NPC chart, NPC herb chart, military chart, further adventures and stuff that you might wanted to purchase. Back of the book. So Tharbad, Cardolan in a nutshell. But Tharbad specifically, adventures revolving around it, but everything you need to operate an adventure within the city of Tharbad and the surrounding regions. Does not go into great detail on after the fall of Tharbad, but it's just a ruins. Occasionally bandit groups and other desperate people might be fine living there, but there's, as a community, Tharbad ceases to exist. Some 500 years, 800 years before the War of the Ring, so there's very little to go on and to deal with in later years. I imagine after the Fourth Age, Tharbad's reestablished as a cultural location with its ties, ancient ties to Nuremberg. It would be a viable location as an inland seaport for trade. Aragon would definitely want to see this place rebuilt, the bridge rebuilt for no other reason, just allow traffic, easier access up and down the river. Imagine it might start small. You might see a ferry or two build up. You'll see villages pop up to support the traffic, and as increasing numbers of men and material move northward to reestablish and rebuild Arnor, it would find its footing again and be rebuilt. It's not mentioned in any canon in that aspect, but that's just my opinion on that. So, hey, this is Rick, the Fat Man, and this is your seat at the table, Thieves of Tharbad.